Good afternoon, Flying V lovers. Today is Sunday, March 9th. I hope you've all set your clocks ahead for daylight savings time. My name is Giselle Donnelly, and I wanted to take a little time today to talk to you about my Flying V fetish. You can see I'm pretty deeply hooked. And in particular, I wanted to talk about this new member of the family, an Andy Powell 67 Flying V, made by Chris Tatalias of Tatalias Guitars. I also wanted to compare it a little bit to my previous Andy Powell V, which I've had for about 15 years or so. It was made by a fellow named Kevin Chilcott, a Welshman who's no longer making guitars, alas, but has made several for Andy Powell, and I was lucky enough to get one of Kevin's Angel V's, as he called them, before he was no longer able to build guitars anymore. I really wanted to talk a bit about the Tatalias V, and then inflict a little bit of the sound of the guitar, at least as I play it, when we wrap up. So, let me begin by talking about how this is similar, but different to not only these guitars, but the ones that probably a dozen or so Flying V's that I've owned previously. This is a really super guitar. My Chilcott V is something, as I said, that I've had for about 15 years. Played it at a ton of gigs, mostly in small bars, and it's been through the wars with me. It still sounds great, still plays great, but it's got a lot of nicks and dings, and on the back of the neck, the finish is beginning to be worn away. So I'm really happy to have this guitar now, to be able to share the burden, and it's like I say, nice to have a guitar that's really very similar. Chris Tatalias was very easy to work with, to try to fit the guitar to my requirements. I have small hands but fat hands. So I kind of need a fretboard that's a little wider but a little shallower to be able to play conveniently and as best I can. And Chris has really come through with this build. A couple things that I will point out, and I'll take pictures of later on, so you can see them a little bit more closely. Starting at the top of the guitar, the headstock, say compared to an original 67 V, is a little bit shorter and smaller than that. And if you were to compare it to the Chilcott V, you'd see what I'm talking about. This really doesn't make an important difference in playability or anything like that, but it's just something that popped out at me. I've only had it for a couple of days. Secondly, it's got a little bit of a volute on the back of the headstock. Probably adds to the strength of the guitar, but again, a little bit different than you might find on a Gibson V today, or at least many of them. Some of the 70s Gibson Vs, some of the worst Gibson Vs ever, did have big fat volutes on them. But this doesn't intrude. In fact, it makes it very comfortable to play in the lower frets. And speaking of the frets, they are beautifully done. The fret edges are beautifully smooth and rounded. You don't hardly feel the frets at all as you go up and down the fretboard. And the fretboard itself is this wonderfully dark piece of mahogany. It's very dense as well. It looks almost like ebony, not quite as dense as ebony would be. As you can see, I've got these sort of split diamond inlays on the guitar. I asked Chris to do that for me. He has put that on some of his other guitars. It gives it a little bit of a Jimi Hendrix vibe, but it also goes well with the V-shaped inlays on the Chilcott guitar. So it's sort of it's nice to, even though it's a signature guitar, it's an Andy Powell Signature guitar, it sort of allows me to feel like it's especially mine. So I appreciate that. Moving down the guitar a little bit, the things that would really impress a long-time V player include the neck joint. Flying V's have had a variety of neck joints through the years. This is the right kind of neck joint. For those of you who may not be familiar with it or say own one of the standard Gibson Flying V's, which is just glued into the body sort of the way an SG would. This has a little platform that comes out from the body itself, not unlike a Fender neck joint, but it's properly joined and smooth. All feels like one continuous piece of wood, but it allows the neck, particularly right at the joint, to be a little bit stronger and I think easier to play, which allows especially for access to the high frets. Those of you who may have owned original 67 or the reissue custom shop 67s will recall that there's a pretty big block of wood that probably makes the neck joint smaller or stronger, but makes access to the higher frets, particularly for those of us who don't have the biggest hands in the world, much more difficult, much more difficult. Couple of other things. I'll talk a bit about the pickups when I play. Just broadly speaking, they're pretty powerful pickups, but they are not dark in the least. They retain really essentially for a Flying V that spanky top end, almost Telecaster-ish, but with a humbucker girth at the same time, that come with older Vs, much less so since the Flying V became kind of a metal guitar. Some of the, again, more recent standard Flying Vs have the ceramic magnet pickups that have resistance, you know, like 11 or 13, 14 ohms resistance. If you like that metal sound, those are great pickups, but for those of us who want to retain the original Flying V sound, and particularly the Andy Powell Old Wishbone Ash Clarity, these are wonderful pickups. Even though they're more powerful than the pickups that I have in these guitars, like I say, they retain that top end, which is one of the real values of a Flying V, at least in my mind. Finally, I will say Chris has got the vibrola right. This is maybe a small thing, but if you're a vibrola addict, it's something that really matters to you. New vibrolas on new guitars can be just so stiff, and it won't give you that vibro trem warble that is, to me, a kind of a signature sound that I'm looking for. And having a slightly spongier, not as spongy as, say, a Bigsby would be, but the feel of a well-used Gibson vibrola is really, to me, what I'm used to, but I also think it's really the best trem arm that's out there. You can't dive bomb with it that much, but I don't do dive bombing. So if you're a shredaholic, maybe not the ideal tailpiece for you. But again, if you're going for something that's more musical, a little bit more subtle, This is, Chris has done this exactly right. I've had on previous guitars to replace vibrola after vibrola until I found one, and to buy an original used one it can be $300–400 a pop now. So other than that, and saying that the finish is really gorgeous, really well done. The spray job on this is really to die for. Very slick playing neck. That sort of concludes the introductory lecture. And if you give me a minute or two, I'll wire up the mat amps, then you know, cause a little mayhem to let you see what the guitar sounds like. Oh, okay, here we are, we're back. We're gonna make a little noise. Let's begin with just some clean chording sounds, okay? These clean, maybe a little smidge of breakup, but that's the way we like it. So here we go. Listen to that thing ring. So, just quick, this is not going to be like a rig rundown or any of that kind of stuff, but just so you know where I'm coming from. I'm using 2 mat amps, one a GT20, which is sort of a 20 watt range sort of a thing, to 5881 power tubes, a little bit like a deluxe reverb, something like that. Second is a model 3000, 2 EL34s in the power section, very much like a GT100, that same clean, very mid-rangey mat amp sound. I find now that it's very difficult for me to use my big boys, so it's even in a lot of places difficult to use this full rig, but I like sort of blending the sound of the 2 amps together, pushing the lower powered one into a little bit of breakup, and just dialing in the clean on the 3000 to keep that bottom end relatively tight. The speakers I'm using are very clean on over my right shoulder, which is where the 3000 is coming out of. A 212 Emperor cabinet, really well made cabinet, made by a fella in Chicago. I have the second one over my left shoulder that's got the GT20 coming through it. In both cases, there are a variety of JBL speakers in the cabinet. So I start with a pretty clean sound. It's not really all that loud, but it is nice and clean. It's good, particularly for chording. Those sort of arpeggiated things. Also keeps your effects nice and clean. Little modulation on that kind of thing. I don't know about you all, but if you get into the modulation effects at all in a band setting that can get really muddy. So having a guitar that puts out a good top end sound and amps that don't immediately go into distortion is really useful for that sort of thing. Right now I'll do a little bit of single note work. I'm going to start using a variety of pedals to let you know what the guitar sounds like with different kinds of pedals. Again, most of my pedals are more in the boost range, not even in the overdrive range. But I do have some overdrives which I'll give you a quick flavor for. So I'm going to start with the RC booster, which is really mostly a volume boost, as a little bit of lower mid-range. Okay. Second one, it's got a little bit of a sort of clon flavor to it, or at least so I'm told. It's a Heather Brown Blessed Mother. One of the reasons that I like this pedal is that it's got a blend knob, so you can blend the sound of the guitar unaffected by the pedal with the pedal. Again, I'm more interested in enhancing the sound of the guitar rather than just relying on the pedal quite so much. I want you to hear my playing for what it's worth, and not the pedal so much. But, so here we go. Okay, last but not least, this is a Timmy pedal, and I kind of use it, a lot of times we'll be playing in a three-piece band, and we'll do like some old Cream kind of stuff. So I set it a little bit darker, so I get a little bit of a kind of a Marshall sound. So, and I'll show you what it's like with the bass pickup too. Okie doke. There you got it. The rig, the sounds that you can get out of this. You'll notice that even on the bass pickup with more distortion coming from the pedal, you can still is not fuzz. You can still hear the notes. They still have some penetrating power, but also a really, really musical quality to them. I look forward to playing this guitar for the rest of my life. It's a real joy to have it. I'm really pleased to have two Andy Powell Signature guitars. I know this probably sounds like I should see a therapist, but you Wishbone Ash fans out there will know what I'm talking about. The music of Wishbone Ash entered my soul about 50 years ago and is still there today. It moves me to tears, it pierces my heart, and it's really a pleasure to be able to try to make that kind of music, get that kind of sound, feel that feeling at home, playing with other people, and on a wonderful guitar like this. So, thanks to Chris Tatalias for a wonderful, wonderful guitar. Thanks to Andy Powell for sponsoring the series of guitar. I commend them to you. If you have not yet signed up for one, think about doing so. I've bought a lot of custom-made guitars. It's a really pretty good price for the instrument that you're getting. And again, I commend Andy Powell and Chris and JDC at Great Hill Media for being very tolerant of my requests and producing an instrument that I'll cherish for the rest of my time. Thank you and enjoy.